Sometimes, the observation of popular releases and their impact on audiences leads to profound insights into the mechanisms of history, more particular of recent palpable history, which might possibly deliver understandings of times yet to come. The forthcoming analysis attempts precisely this, drawing on direct experience of two media works focusing on the historical character of Anastasia, the Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia, the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, the last sovereign of Imperial Russia, and his wife Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna, a quest for answers to interrogations related to the cyclicity of history and its potential predictability. This essay approaches the phenomenon Anastasia in cross-cultural perspective, with specific focus on the eponymous American animated musical fantasy drama movie from 1997 and on Takarazuka Revue's Japanese theatrical version from 2020. Produced and directed by Bluth and Gary Oldman, the 1997 Anastasia was based on Marcelle Maurette's play Anastasia from 1952, which drew on the story of Anna Anderson, the best known of the many Anastasia impostors and on impersonators who emerged after the Russian imperial family were killed in July 1918. Anastasia brought Maurette international recognition and was later adapted into the 1956 American period drama movie of the same name, directed by Anatole Litvak with a screenplay by Arthur Lawrence. Takarazuka Revue's performance was inspired heavily by the animated version while making use of dramaturgic ideas from the stage musical world premiered in 2016 in Hartford with music by Stephen Flaherty, lyrics by Lynn Ahrens, and book by Terence McNally. It is true that the success of Anastasia, released from 1997, spawned various adaptations into other media, including a direct-to-video spin-off movie, a computer game, books, toys, etc. But the Takarazuka Revue adaptation was selected for the current analysis due to its far-reaching implications, openly or covertly expressed. On the one hand, it reconnects with a performance with similar contents, the brutal decline and violent death of the Romanov dynasty, from 2017, titled Land of Gods, The Twilight of the Romanovs, staged by the same Cosmos troupe which subsequently performed Anastasia, and which is subliminally associated in audiences' perception with progressive vision of future-oriented shows, and scheduled precisely 100 years after the Russian Revolution had started. On the other hand, Takarazuka Revue's Anastasia seems to announce a discrete but profound shift in geopolitical preoccupations, as the parimono genre is employed in a nearly Dostoevskian manner and reminiscent of Émile Zola's naturalism, rather than of Perrault's oversized glittering transcendence. As will be shown during the hermeneutic analysis resulting from decade-long qualitative and quantitative fieldwork, consisting of phenomenological experience and empirical inquiries, literature review, as well as archive research, the recovery of Anastasia's, the character identity throughout her journey both inwards and by train westwards, is a metaphor for history yet to come, emerging from the redistribution of power relations on the world stage in the global era, with Japan as the lighthouse of the future, or the locomotive, another compelling metaphor on the background of Takarazuka Revue Company's fiscally former belonging to Hankyu Railways Holdings. Scheduled at a moment in time, November-December 2020 in Takarazuka and January-February 2021 in Tokyo, in which the COVID-19 pandemic was globally still in full rage, and with Japan experimenting a repetition of the famous or infamous closed country politics, or sakoku, of the pre-modern era, from Edo period, which had lasted between 1603 and 1868, locally described as Sai Sakoku, or New Closed Country, Anastasia appears equally as part of an inertia within a marketing strategy we started in late 2016, promoting Japan as the initiator of a new world order. Nonetheless, this marketing strategy will increasingly fade away in 2021 and even more strikingly in 2022, replaced by a gradual focus on individualism, mistrust in governmental capabilities, and a fresh representation of history more intimately connected to internationally recognized narratives. Staged at Takarazuka Grand Theatre from 7 November until 14 December 2020 and at Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre from 8 January until 21st February 2021, with Makaze Suzuho as Dimitri and Hoshikaze Madoka as Anastasia or Anya in the lead roles. Cosmos Troupe's version of Anastasia was based on Anastasia the musical, with music by Stephen Flaherty and lyrics by Lynn Ahrens on a book by Terence McNally, which premiered on Broadway at Broadhurst Theatre in April 2017 after its initial world premiere in 2016 in Hartford, which in its turn originated in Don Bluth's and Gary Goldman's animated musical movie Anastasia from 1997. Traditionally associated with strictly conservative gender politics and socio-economic hierarchies, military-like instruction methods and performance standards which transcend the wildest expectations while pushing the entertainment industry beyond the limitations of technological progress, fans' requirements, and technocrats' visions, Takarazuka Revue has been accompanying Japan since its foundation in 1914. Simultaneously a faithful mirror of Japanese society and a lucid barometer-like institution for the future, Takarazuka Revue's hallmark is its all-female cast impersonating both male and female roles, divided in 5 performing troupes, which bring on the stages of the 2 major theaters in West Japan, Takarazuka Grand Theatre in the city of Takarazuka, and in East Japan, Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre, close to the posh district of Ginza in Japan's capital. During 10 weekly performances throughout the entire year, a huge diversity of topics covering all genres and historical, geographical areas. These are embedded in theatrical live performances with Western popular music, laborious choreographies, and impressive singing acts, luxurious stage design, sparkling and quickly changing costumes, compounded by discrete displays of individual excellence. Moreover, since 1974's blockbuster, The Rose of Versailles, Takarazuka Revue has been essentially circumscribing the so-called shoujo culture, the framework delineating femininity, feminine identity, and feminine corporality by means of instrumentalizing female teenagers within Japan's repressive systems, juxtaposing consumerism, sexuality, and public discourses on love, marriage, reproduction. Among the 5 active troupes, Flower Troupe, Moon Troupe, both founded in 1921, Snow Troupe, founded in 1924, Star Troupe, founded in 1933 and Forbidden in 1939, and since 1948, and Cosmos Troupe since 1998, each of them being linked with specific characteristics which then color the messages of the performances themselves. Cosmos Troupe is associated with a non-conformist allure, breaking prevailing standards in Takarazuka Revue's tradition. Founded in 1998, the Cosmos Troupe is the youngest among the 5 acting ensembles of the Takarazuka Revue company. In comparison to other troupes, it is regarded as less bound to any sort of image of Takarazuka Revue as a socio-economic or political cultural phenomenon might have established. The employment of the Cosmos Troupe in Anastasia and in The Land of Gods, additionally outlined later on, strikes in audience's perception a chord of experimental, explorative exuberance. Simultaneously, it suggests Takarazuka Revue's administrators' self-awareness of its fundamental role in conveying and therefore discreetly inducing in its mainly Japanese, predominantly female audiences ideas about the future and its fallacies, as well as expectations for their roles as mothers and primary educators in building up that very future. Moreover, long-term observation of Takarazuka Revue's business model encouraging deep fandom and relying on fans' loyalty as a means to advance its market dominance within the Japanese entertainment industry renders unexpected insights into the mechanisms of production, consumption, perception, assimilation, and reproduction of media phenomena in Japan. Taking into account the fact that the Japanese media industry is extremely vivacious and almost painful in its superficiality, with a calculated momentary impact on audiences, Takarazuka Revue's longevity, with more than 110 years of uninterrupted activity, is a powerful reminder that determination, hard work, and persistence are worthy assets in the hierarchy of human values, although not always forthrightly advertised as such. Fostered with loving care in the educational process, such values lead to a healthy sense of self, which then allows for vulnerability to flourish. In this understanding, vulnerability refers to the ability to display and perform authenticity, more commonly known as to be one's true self, both towards oneself and towards others, despite Japan's prevalent social cultural pressures to wear symbolic masks and to play predetermined roles. As will be shown later on in the extremely ruthless psychology of Japan's cultural consumption, only two elements could revitalize the post-Second World War humiliation: the repeated acknowledgement of the failure of the American dream due to the loss of faith, and the intensive reiteration of family as core entity of the society within the framework of a seemingly progressive wrapping of national ideals. Takarazuka Revue's Cosmos Troupe would prove a vital mechanism in its representational process of Russia as a potential fresh orientation center, possibly replacing France and by all means USA. After a detailed examination of Takarazuka Revue's performance Anastasia, I expand the in-depth analysis towards Russia's global significance, both in light of 2020 and of events ever since. The economy of the current analysis, three dimensions of Takarazuka Revue's representation of the Anastasia narrative stand out: the shifting importance of Russia as the background for live performances, the employment of parimono or parent-centered performances since 1927 Mon Paris in Takarazuka Revue's nomenclature, and the position of the Cosmos Troupe in staging Anastasia. In 2017, 100 years after the Bolshevik Revolution put an end to the centuries-old Russian Empire and changed the history of the world, the performance The Land of Gods, The Twilight of the Romanovs, staged at Takarazuka Grand Theatre from 18 August until 25 September 2017 and at Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre from 13 October until 19 November 2017, with Asaka Manato and Reimi Urara in the lead roles, displayed in nostalgic tones of remembrance and pain the tableau of a wintry Russian aristocracy, entangled in its own twisted sense of importance and unable to sense the upcoming upheavals. As usual, Cosmos Troupe delivered touching reverberations of times long past, but lacking the temporal friction from earlier performances based on Leo Tolstoy's monumental novel War and Peace from 1869, staged by Star Troupe in 1988 and 1989, and a subtle pretext to explore Napoleon Bonaparte's life and work, or his complex novel Anna Karenina from 1878, staged by Snow Troupe in 2001, by Star Troupe in 2008, by Moon Troupe in 2019, which, like Gone with the Wind, allow Takarazuka Revue's administrators to orchestrate once again modern visions on masculinity based on the main female character's flaws and lack of existential direction, and by focusing on Count Alexei Kirillovich Vronsky, or Alyosha, who turns into the main character. In contrast, The Land of Gods investigates a symbolical return to the sacredness of rural life, which could transcend history's violence and past suffering in the light of a new beginning. Like Marie Antoinette's tragic fate, the Austrian Queen of France, who was guillotined due to her inability to see the reality metamorphosing in front of her own eyes, and who belongs to the most celebrated and mourned characters in the popular culture of Japanese media, the Romanovs are seen as ill-fated figures, swallowed by the waves of history, inevitably intertwined with the dramatic shifts triggered by mechanisms of popularity and completely cut off from their intrinsic significance. In The Land of Gods, both the obvious display of the social fact, revolution, and the unstoppable progression of the individual in the spotlight on the most powerful stage of a traditionally collectivist society, or at least a society discursively constructed as collectivist, bring forth the vision of a world in which personal excellence, conceived as a combination of integrity, empathy, and vulnerability on the one hand, and hard work, persistence, and humility on the other hand, becomes the new standard in the main male character's constitution. Dmitry Pavlovich Romanov, a fictional cousin to Nicholas II and a young imperial guardsman, who synthesizes in his persona authenticity, so deeply admired in the representatives of the divinely appointed aristocracy and upper class. Yet, the violence of revolution and its dualism reveal the impossibility of following classical rules of behavior and internal validation, as well as the increasing ambivalence of traditionally transmitted ideals. There is comfort in the centuries-old codex of obeying the rules without questioning them, or in following strong leaders without asking for reassurance, but modernity, with its challenges and uncertainties, dissolves the warm, soft protective layer offered by hierarchical structures and requires instead initiative and a sense of discernment. The Romanovs' strikingly artificial appearance represents highly contradictory alternatives to the ongoing project of reinventing social roles and modeling them according to patterns established once again in accordance with historical requirements, in their fluid, non-controversial figures with their weak, convoluted personalities and inability to provide material support, moral orientation to those around them, or mental toughness in times of turmoil, the predominantly female Japanese audiences recognize traditional patterns of relating and identifying, both in their function as mothers and primary educators, and in their yearnings for a world of emotional outbursts and explosive passions. 3 years later, in late 2020, Anastasia burst the Gordian knot of hesitant performance strategy and public display of educational conformity by eviscerating the parimono subgenre with naturalist insertions a la Émile Zola and reframing it in Dostoevsky-like dimensions. The parimono genre refers in Takarazuka Revue's nomenclature to performances centered on Paris as the inception space of ideological modernity due to a French Revolution of 1789 and celebrated as such since 1927's Montparis, Japan's first performance pattern upon Western, respectively French models, while proclaiming at the same time Japan's supremacy and world leadership, with repeated reiterations ever since in approximately 30% of performances. The memorable The Rose of Versailles from 1974 and its numerous restagings in diverse settings throughout the decades play a crucial role in Takarazuka Revue's and to a certain degree in Japan's success at representing itself domestically as the real center of the globally designed future. In Anastasia, a huge parable on the protective power of amnesia and the benefits resulting from not always remembering the past, at least not all too accurately, the main male character Dimitri, without family name, a man of questionable morality, turns to the right pathway in contact with genuine aristocracy which transcends poverty and betrayal. The female main character's absence of a clearly outlined past hinders her emergence as a full-fledged citizen. Simultaneously, it allows for an infinity of potential futures to take shape, initially blurry, on the horizon of historical manifestations, counterpointing Anya's silhouette and her shy walls among the many shadows haunting the derelict imperial palace and its symbolical ramifications in interwar France. Takarazuka Revue's Anastasia reiterates pre-war Montparis imperialist ethos and its overtly paternalist message from 1927, embedded within a thick emotional fabric of Otokoyaku's cool reticence and Musumeyaku's cute submission, which reverse the cliché of the disempowered human being into a hero of longing and paradoxically belonging. Like in The Land of Gods, generosity and spiritual enlightenment underscore, according to the axiological ideal promoted by Takarazuka Revue, the re-evaluation of humanity from a competitive undertaking towards a playful togetherness. The desire to situate itself, that is, Takarazuka Revue Company, and as such Japan, as the credible successor to the world's last two great empires, the Russian Empire before it became Soviet Union and the United States of America, transpires from deep within and inoculates itself into audiences' subconscious. Beneath this stylistic cacophony, ideological inconsistency, and aesthetic contradictions, Takarazuka Revue as a historical phenomenon arises as a romantic world, and first of all, a world full of longing for romantics, with the Takarazian as a Lichtgestalt, an athletic, slender angel of light, profiled on the background of a rigorous, disciplined lifestyle as the pathway to individual fulfillment and national supremacy. Moreover, in tune with Montparis, initial plot of a trip from Takarazuka throughout Asia and Europe until Paris in 1927, the train excursion starting in Moscow, a direct suggestion to Hankyu Railway's holdings, to which Takarazuka Revue belongs as an economic sub-entity, appears as a symbolical appropriation of the other and a powerful mechanism to materialize the self in relation to that mysterious other. The staggering success of Montparis and the long-standing performance strategy it launched might be explained by the increasing awareness of the regular citizen of inclusion within a greater whole, in which consumption and excess are intensified by the foreign flavor of unknown places and people. More importantly, Montparis has continuously provided nostalgic undertones and ideological orientation since its world premiere, in spite of never being restaged after Japan's surrender in August 1945. In Anastasia, it is not the French Revolution of 1789 which disturbs history, but the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, which satisfies the irresistible urge of human beings to witness dramatic shifts in the outer world in order to submit to radical changes within. a drive deeply, radically outrooted by systematic education in Japan. The empathic participation in the live representation as performer or spectator mediates the feeling of connectedness in this parallel world to the modern Japanese quotidian life, infused with Western influences dominated by consumerism, excess, and the illusion of luxury through surplus. By overwhelmingly orchestrating these very parameters, Western-like appearance of the actresses, consumption-driving marketing strategies, excess, luxury, and surplus, celebrating performance practices, Takarazuka Revue shows an uncanny ability to foresee history's development and to represent it avant la lettre on its shiny stage. The problem remains, of course, the fact that the world at large is a far less shiny stage and far less favorable to the Japanese view of reality than Takarazuka Revue would gladly want to make its audiences believe. In the long run, Anastasia disruption of the parimono subgenre might prove a slightly modified return to the ideal of Takarazuka Revue's founder Kobayashi Ichizo, of it being a theater for the average people and representing them, their dreams and their yearnings. Combined with the preference for the Cosmos Troupe as the carrier of Takarazuka Revue's most progressive contents, the theatrical medium Takarazuka Revue turns once again into an instrument of reflecting, promoting, propagating, implementing, and thus providing alternative role models and existential paradigms to audiences within the neoliberal undercurrents crisscrossing Japan's public discourse in mid and late 2010s, famous or infamous for its increasingly conservative tendencies. Anastasia additionally reinforces the subliminal premises for the wakon wasai, usually translated as Japanese spirit or Japanese roots, and Japanese technology and knowledge strategy, with friendship and kindness as the core parameters of a new paradigm of humanity, and transcending the Western modernity, which had been emulated by Meiji technocrats into the wakon yosai, usually translated as Japanese spirit, roots, and Western technology knowledge slogan. Unlike the Western modernity project, based on efficiency and competitiveness and prioritizing economic growth and technological progress over political stability and social cohesion, the Japanese solution brings into foreground cooperation and compassion as social culture parameters, compounded by integrity and harmony as tools to attain and keep peace, both within nations and, more importantly, between and among nations. While it has been repeatedly argued that Takarazuka Revue, a huge institution within the highly corporationist entertainment industry in Japan, represents a typical phenomenon of cultural intellectual hybridization, which has been occurring since 1868 and dovetails with the prevailing social political agenda by buttressing aesthetic ideological patterns officially endorsed by the Japanese establishment, Anastasia displays once again Takarazuka Revue's public self-advertisement policy as a world of love, in which friendship, hardcore, and individual excellence serve the greater ideal of a dynamic community based on compassion, respect, and trust among its members, the supreme goals of any enlightened society in late modern era, with self-love at its core, as initially postulated by Erich Fromm in The Art of Loving from 1965, a concatenation of self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-respect, compounded by courage and integrity, as well as kindness. Kobayashi rejected specific structures of the Japanese traditional theater, such as music, which he considered unsuitable for powerful military marches or impressive chorus, and consequently adopted Western popular music, even in Asian or Japanese plots, where popular melodic clichés were mixed with Western sounds. His goal is to create a theater for the people and to offer them models of discipline and hard work on the one hand, and to support the imperialist leveling efforts on the other hand, were summed up as it follows: entertainment, education, and assimilation of the audiences can be attained through manners, social interactions, and friendship. It is within this complex framework that Takarazuka Revue's performative educational practices and their powerful impact outside of the entertainment industry are to be observed. The reality of the audiences and of their interaction with Takarazuka Revue's administrators and actresses is in fact the reality of a manually crafted metaphorical work, as subtly but effectively interwoven in Anastasia's dramaturgic architecture, which, if left to its own device, might symbolically push forward the collapse of the reality of the general society. When controlled, it is indeed a romantic, friendly, metaphorical work, softly melting fantasy and substantiality into one. Juxtaposed over this message of political acceptance and economic nurturance, there is the far-reaching idea of a world of love, incessantly promoted by Takarazuka Revue in its public advertisements of corporate policy. While it is a perfectly valid ideal to live by, its practical affirmation makes place for abusive interpretation, with very limited freedom of movement and coming dangerously close to wartime rhetorics. It is true that theatrical performance allows for freedom of expression and exploration of potential worlds. It also delves into new ways of resemantization of familiar circumstances. The Japanese version of stage representation, as provided by Takarazuka Revue, though, raises more questions than it attempts to answer, not least due to its unilateral view of history and historical circumstances. More than being a stable entity for the silent majority to follow, Takarazuka Revue's proposal for a future society suggests rather a shadowy adaptation to the expectations and pressures of that very silent majority, whom the Takarazian was once supposed or chosen to lead. Only the future can show whether this vision of intellectual excellence and universalism, which has been the foundation of Western innovation and progress, can offer valid solutions for Japan, Asia, and beyond as well. Anastasia topos is a charred one. On the one hand, it echoes deep collective memories of blatant social inequalities, limitless luxury, in contrast with bottomless poverty, and the historically materialized necessity to erase them. On the other hand, it delivers undeniable proofs of the meaningless brutality of masses led into destruction and bloodshed without substantial changes resulting in the aftermath. In fact, recent history shows that quite the opposite tends to happen after the demise of strong leaders, as autocratic and despotic as they might have been. In addition, its popularity connects to the main site of development in the initial iterations, interwar Paris, as the intellectual cultural center of the civilized world, having emerged and flourished from the chaos of another history-changing event, the French Revolution. In critically observing the animated version and the live theatrical performance centered upon Anastasia, two dimensions stand out. Firstly, the feminine presence gaining contours and individuality against the background of the revolutions, serving as a soft reminder that change does not have to be violent, but can, in fact, occur in tones of peaceful conflict, both necessary and healthy. Secondly, the shifting world order from a West-dominated one towards a pluricentric one, which would allow for parallel systems to coexist, perhaps even harmoniously, rather than relentlessly fight each other. To start with the first dimension, both in the Bloods and Goldmans and in Takarazuka Revue's version, Anya's journey is not about socio-economic gain. It is about understanding her own self. In the animated movie, this personal journey reflects the preoccupations of the time, with feminism becoming increasingly intellectually relevant, questioning the male-regulated discourses of individual development and registering female life trajectories as equally important in the definition, perception, processing, appropriation, and reiteration of role models. In the live theatrical version, despite the focus on Dimitri due to top star Otokoyaku's absolute position in Takarazuka Revue's dramaturgic logic, it is still Anya commanding the performance significance, a huge and unique modification from the company's more than centennial policy. As striking as this might be, it is indicative of the increasingly powerful awareness that female instances play indeed crucial roles in the society, not only as mothers and primary educators, but more so as active citizens and reliable, responsible members. The role of the Cosmos Troupe in this configuration accentuates the revolutionary stance, progressive and staging more often than not performances with contrarian messages to the Japanese status quo. The Cosmos Troupe serves in 2020s Anastasia's import to Japan as a mediator between the millennial tradition and the creativity of times yet to come within the unstoppable flux of history. The second dimension emerges from the first one and outlines itself as potentially more imperative. The gradual realization that upheaval does not have to be violent, but can borrow smoothness from the femininity of transitions, organically unfolding as step-by-step processes and therefore allowing for events to unravel towards final goals which might transcend initially envisioned outcomes. The ending, in which Anya turned Anastasia chooses to elope with Dmitri instead of enjoying the privileges of her socio-economic position, is, I would argue, the crucial secret beneath Anastasia's enduring popularity despite the decades and the conventionality of the animated medium. Life is a flow of events, and there is always something which our limited consciousness cannot grasp. Releasing control and moving forward without constraining ourselves to what we already know grants the limitless potentialities of the world and of history to manifest naturally without our often violent interventions. It is in line with this vision of a more feminine, pluricentric, or rhizome-like existence that the emerging global order seems to constitute itself. If we do not want a repetition of history as it cyclically reveals itself since times immemorial, we need to allow a feminization of history to enter the universal circuit as a complementary structure to the one familiar so far from multi-millennial experience. As in Takarazuka Revue's version of Anastasia, it is not a replacement, but a peaceful harmonization of two essential architectures within the same conglomerate. In the same manner, Topstamo Tokoyaku constructively cooperates with Topstamo Sumeyaku in building up a coherent narrative of mutual acceptance, respect, and understanding without any attempts at overpowering each other. The world could start to move towards multidimensionality of coexistence systems instead of fiercely competing and constantly, continuously fighting each other. It is, one might argue, the Japanese vision of the future, the way it was projected before the pandemic struck in early 2020, a prominent reminder of Takarazuka Revue's scheduling its performances 12 to 18 months in advance. Things have changed tremendously ever since, but the lessons of the past remain the same, with the clear message, despite ideological deviations, that unless we learn and shift the paradigm towards universal benevolence, peaceful harmonization, and creative permission for the organic manifestation of events, humanity is doomed. Thank you and welcome to the future.